first mob is an elite with more HP than anything I fought in the whole game so far.
No,
Oh, I'm dead.
Oh no, he's down.
Well, it's really good.
No, some on-ground effect.
Oh, it has 15%.
Oh, it's
life.
drifting shade! Oh my god. I'm so stuck in this. Oh, wait, I'm free.
Oh,
Oh, we can trip it. We can trip it, Zen. Just fucking auto-attack the fucker.
Oh man. Stop wasting our respawns, then. Oh my god.
it's all up to you now.
It's all you, bold boy.
Oh.
Hey guys, I'm Matt Lighty, and this is my video going over my current build and the one I'm playing to level 100 on my Druid, and that build is Lightning Storm. Now I've tested every single viable Druid build that exists, at least from 75 with proper World Tier 4 Ancestral gear, so not half-assed level 50 builds. And in my opinion, by far, I do believe that this is the best build of all the ones. Now, there are certain uniques that we don't have access to yet because they're incredibly rare. Equivocal rarity values, if you were to think of a game like Path of Exile, is there are items and uniques that could be build defining that are as rare as Headhunters or Magebloods for context. So don't have access to those yet, but I am quite far into the game and I'm beginning and pushing in-game content. So first, before anything, let's just show what the build actually does. We'll just do a tier 50 dungeon. That's a pretty good baseline for showcasing a build. Not to shit on other people, but if anyone is showing off a build and it's not in at least a level 50 dungeon, I would be suspicious towards how viable the build is. The gist of the build is your Druid utilizing the core skill Lightning Storm, which is a channeled ability, which is a bit awkward because you're standing still, and it has a great AoE. Okay single target. The single target actually scales in value basically depending on the size of the target. Smaller targets we have harder times doing damage to, and since the channeling is scaled upon how we hold the ability and the size that scales with it, it almost makes more sense to channel just once or twice and then, you know, keep doing that versus holding it down and reaching a higher AoE because we fucking miss human targets, basically. There are no map mods, sigil mods you can't do. The ones I'd recommend are the one that to not do are the ones that say damage from distance reduction and damage from crit reduction, damage from lightning reduction, because we typically crit with lightning from a distance. Aside from that, the only mod I would really not do is backstabbers because it's just the most lethal thing in the game. Aside from that, there are no mods you can't do when mapping. Here's our first elite. They die quite quickly. As you can see, our damage is very high. It's just about, you know, being cognizant of where we're casting from. Because of the Grizzly Rage ultimate, we are unstoppable most of the time. Oh, look, it's the Butcher. We're kind of stuck here just channeling. I don't think we're going to stun him anytime soon. A little awkward here. See, when our Grizzly Rage is down, we are a lot more susceptible because we don't have, you know, that unstoppable up. But once our Grizzly Rage is back up, we're back to being unstoppable. Life feels a lot better. Let's put it that way. Anyway, there's the Butcher, level 50. You can see the awkwardness, though, that all Druid builds have when your Grizzly Rage is off cooldown. You're a little bit exposed. That's unavoidable. Even if you have maximum cooldown reduction, maximum increased ultimate duration, there's going to be that couple seconds, I think it's about 10 seconds on the top end, where your Grizzly Rage isn't up and you are unholy susceptible to things like the Butcher. Cyclone Armor we have passively preventing us from taking a little bit of damage. Our Hurricane, which is our swirly thing around us, gives us some mitigation, some damage. And aside from that, we technically have Stormclaw and left click if we ever need to generate. We never need to generate spirit because the build is optimized in a way that almost always nets more spirit than you use. Because of spirit cost reduction, our Lightning Storm is actually currently down to 10 spirit. Now, I don't want to get it confused. This build does require quite good gear, require some specific gear too. I just one-shot that Gobbo. That's gonna hurt. Yep, now that you've seen it, let's just take a minute to showcase. Oh, I really can't do that in this map because I'm going to be dying from the lightning thing. Okay, we'll finish the map and we'll recoup afterwards. I was going to take a minute to show off the actual bones of the build, but it's a little lethal in this situation. Here's a little single target showcase. So this is a larger target, so we actually can fully channel our Lightning Storm, and it'll start to hit, you know, multiple of the lightning strikes will hit the target at once, which definitely feels better. And big slam, cool. All right, easy peasy. Yeah, you can see the damage for single target's totally fine. It just only becomes problematic towards the end when we small boys. Hard to hit small boys. Okay, so you've seen what the build looks like as far as actual gameplay and how it functions for clear, single target, etc. Let's take a brief minute to talk about the bones of the build, because that's the interesting part per se. So we have in the skill tree itself, again, we're not really using any basic skill. We don't need to, but because we might as well take one, we just grab Storm Strike with Enhanced Storm Strike, just so if, you know, shit hits the fan, we have something. We don't really need it. Our main skill is Lightning Storm. First enhancement increases its AoE and preserves it after channeling. The more we channel it, the bigger it gets. And this way, if we channel up to 6, then for 4 seconds after that, we still do that large AoE, which is kind of nice for clearing. We prefer to get the additional strike. Not much point to get the chance to immobilize, because most things are mobilized anyway, so it feels like it's a moot point. For passives, more crit damage to close enemies, but mostly just gain access to it just for the movement speed, because it feels nice. Additionally, we get the maximum spirit in Heart of the Wild, but again, mostly traveling through it just to get wild impulses, which gives us way more damage, but it does cost more spirit. Ultimately, it makes no difference because our spirit is basically free. Now for passives, we have traveling through Ancestral Fortitude, again to grab Vigilance, defensive skills, of which we have a few. The main one being Cyclone Armor as a defensive skill. We could proc pretty often. If we want that additional damage reduction, it feels nice to have when we need it. Speaking of Cyclone Armor, we just have a passive. You can spec into Preserving, meaning every 10 seconds you get for 2 seconds, so 8 off for 8, on for 2, 30% damage reduction. It's not terrible. I found it to be really not necessary and not really reliable, so I'd kind of spec out of that. So I just have the basic Cyclone Armor for the passive, and the active, if I get gangbanged, I could just hit the active, knocking back the enemies. Feels quite nice. Blood Howl is super, super strong with Werewolf builds. This is basically like a free flask we have up all the time. It's a 25% heal of our max life, and it is up constantly, because the enhancement reduces its cooldown by 1 second for each kill, which means it's up all the time. I really love Innate Blood Howl for this. This is actually great because we're constantly triggering Blood Howl between packs while fighting. This tops up our spirit regeneration, and if you have any amount of increased spirit gain on gear, it does scale up this 20 value. I believe for me currently, my Blood Howl gets me close to 30 spirit, which is really, really nice when, you know, kind of closing up the gaps of when our spirit is maybe in the lower end. We pick up Nature's Reach for more distance damage, which typically we're always casting at a distance. And here's the fun section. Now this build is passive heavy. You can see that there's like 30 points in passives right here. Hurricane is pretty much every Druid build picks it up. It's a free little AoE that you get up with high uptime. It slows things, and it has damage reduction, great for bosses. Now this subsection of passives and lightning is hilarious. So we have Storm skills making vulnerable on a lucky hit, very nice. We path through increased duration, we path through a chance to immobilize, and we get to the back end, which is lucky hit, to have a 15% chance to immobilize, which is why we don't pick up the first immobilize, because we've already got this. If they're immobilized, lightning damage dealt to them is increased by 18%. So typically everything's immobilized because our lucky hit height chance is quite high. We're hitting so frequently, this procs quite often. So great there. Come down to Neurotoxin, Pathing Crew for additional poison slow, and this, what this does is this 1 point in Toxic Claws makes it so when we hit shit with a Werewolf skill, which everything's a Werewolf skill because you'll see our gear, everything's poisoned, meaning Envenom gives us additional crit damage against everything pretty much. Coming down here we have Defiance, which is magic nature damage. I have more in my amulet, which is why mine says 6 out of 3. To elites, very, very good. Additional damage to vulnerable. Circle of Life is nature magic. And I got 1 point here for some triple damage, which is irrelevant, mostly just for the 2% damage, so pretty cool there. So more damage, more damage, more damage. Now, Grizzly Rage is the linchpin of many a Druid build. The cooldown baseline is 60 seconds. We have ours down to 38. It can actually go a little bit lower. If you have Perfect Gear, I believe it's like 32 or something. And it's a 20-second uptime. I'm just going to briefly show gear here because it's kind of important. Almost every single Druid build has this Grizzly Rage increased by 8 seconds on our amulet. And crits give us crit damage. This is why it's so powerful. So 28-second Grizzly Rage, where we have super duper crit damage during it, gives us so much damage. So you know, it's going to be 10 seconds of it being off cooldown, basically, for us. And I believe you can get that down to about 4 or 5 seconds of a very small window. The entire time this is active, it's also fortifying our base life and making us unstoppable. Meaning when Grizzly Rage is active, we basically do not die. It's really hard for us to die. On top of that, because we have the Grizzly Rage into a Direwolf thing, which retains all our wolf skills, you can see the whole thing kind of coming together now. Instead of the damage reduction, we gain movement speed, which is good clear, and we also gain spirit cost reduction, which makes our, you know, our 10 become a 5. Even better. Also, we get healed for 10%, you know, for each kill, which is on top of the fact we're getting those kills and refreshing our blood hell. You can start to see how we're basically, unless we're getting a one shot, we're not really dying. And our ultimate passive is Earthen Might, which when we lucky hit, there's a chance to restore our spirit, which keeps our lightning stores up, causes my next guaranteed crits. And they also get increased chance, 10% for crits, 10% for mobilizes. Almost everything's a crit and everything's immobilized, so a much higher chance. But you might be thinking, how does this proc for Earthen skills when our lightning storm isn't an Earthen skill? That's where our gear comes in. So we have another legendary aspect is our Earthen Might applies to storm skills. That's right. So this does work for us because this is a storm skill, not an Earthen skill. And you may be wondering, well, how come all this stuff is also werewolf skills? Well, that comes to another full circle, the unique Tempest Roar. Your base storm skills are now also werewolf skills. That is right. So we have a werewolf lightning storm, and your werewolf form is now our true form. This means we're always in werewolf mode. We always get +2 ranks to all that stuff. And our storm skills, when they lucky hit, there's a chance to regain spirit. You can start to see how this all kind of synergistically comes together. So those are the main ones that are affecting our, you know, the engine of the build is the Grizzly Rage into Grizzly Werebear, the Earthen Might applying to our storm skills, our werewolf skills being storm skills, us always being a werewolf and getting additional ranks and werewolf things. Then you start to get into the little nitty-gritty defensive aspects. We have the increased armor when us dealing any sort of damage. This is almost always up. And when we're unstoppable, which, as you know, we always are because of Grizzly Rage, we get additional movement speed, and we can move freely through enemies, which is like phasing in Path of Exile terms. Now, when it comes to the damage modifiers, we have 3. One of them is your core skills deal increased damage based on our Fortify. Now, because of Grizzly Rage, we're always fortified at max health. They're always doing that 40% in the top end increased damage. Our other one is increased damage for standing still. We're almost always standing still because we're channeling. Every time we're doing damage, we're channeling, we're standing still. It all kind of feeds in together. And here's the big one, okay? Lightning Storm crits spawn dancing bolts that seek enemies in the area. What this basically means is when we crit with Lightning Storm, which is, again, almost always, it does little sparks shock out, increasing the damage, increasing the AoE. Those are crits. Those crits give us more spirit, meaning we can keep lightning storming, and the engine continues. We're always Grizzly. We're always unstoppable. We're always shocking. We're always poisoning. We're always, you know, lightning, lightning, lightning. That's kind of how the build functions. Now, the Paragon board, we, in this build, use a full board. We go all the way up, all the way up, all the way down, all the way around. Even this section we loop down over here. We pick up a lot of legendary nodes, a lot of key glyphs. I'm not going to go over everything specifically. All the information is in the description below, which I can actually showcase real quick because it's kind of fascinating. If we take a brief look over here, here is the d4builds.gg breakdown. You can see all the gear, all the aspects I'm using, the specific gems, the skills, my druid aspects, even specifically. These all cyclically fit into the build. Healing us, resetting cooldowns, increasing ult durations, crit chance, that sort of stuff. You can see our skill tree, which we just went over, and our Paragon board, and our stats, and also the note section I have, because it does go over rare gear optimization. When I wrote this down, even it's just mostly for reference for myself, because I don't remember. You know exactly what you want on what gear and why. That's in the description below. So the key things we're picking up here as far as legendary aspects are crits with werewolf skills restore 2 spirit. Now again, Lightning Storm is a werewolf skill, so this also stacks with our Tempest Roar. So now you can start to see how 1 crit on 1 enemy can restore up to 6 spirit. And when we're Grizzly Raging, our Lightning Storm only costs 5 spirit, and that's just for one enemy. So that basically means we're almost always netting positive. Even on single target, we're netting positive if we're critting. And again, that's one Lightning Storm hit, which makes 3 Dancing Bolts. If those crit, that's, 15 more spirit. Another legendary node is increased crit chance against vulnerable immobilized. Everything we hit is vulnerable. Everything we hit is immobilized. We're actually this board, we're skipping the connecting tendrils. It's simply not worth picking up. We don't really need to poison things. Not really worth it. We will be coming across here, down here, to pick up Heightened Malice, which just really says for packs, because in a single target, there's not going to be 3 or more poisoned enemies, right, for bossing. But for a pack, if I Lightning Storm a pack, most likely 3 of those mobs will be poisoned, gives us more additional damage, helps us burn packs down. It's worth pathing to. And another legendary aspect is very important down here. After spending 75 spirit, you deal increased damage for 5 seconds. Well, we spend 75 spirit almost every 5 seconds. We just get it back, but we spend it every 5 seconds, so this is almost always up. So between that being up constantly, that's a huge chunk of damage. We have Thunderstruck over here, huge chunk of damage. So really great damage on the board, not to mention, in general, there's a lot of insane nodes we have for Druid. Here's an example of Fulminate giving huge damage. You have Earth and Sky giving huge damage. Even the basic notables like Tempest give 45% crit damage. So tons of damage in the Paragon board for this build. It is very Paragon intensive. It is very level intensive. It is very gear intensive. Some of the things we discussed about gear, getting the engine going. You require an awfully good offhand to start this build in general. You need things like CDR, you need things like resource generation, you need things like spirit cost reduction. Getting these 3 mods on any piece of gear possible, not to mention crit rate. You need to have near perfect crit rate on most of your gear. You want to get that crit chance as high as possible. The more crits you do, the more spirit you get back, the more dancing bolts you release. Kind of all feeds together. So you're looking for things like spirit cost reduction, cooldown reduction, crit rate on rings if possible. If you want to check my crit rate for context, my critical strike chance is 39%. I believe you can get to 50% on this build, which is where you'd want to be. You want to be critting almost always, as much as possible, because you want to keep getting your spirit back, and back. But that's basically it. That really showcases what the build has to offer, what it is. Again, I think this is the best Druid build that currently exists, having played all of them. I've pushed as high as the 70s for Nightmare Sigils. My gear is not perfect. I'm not level 100. But, and my aspects aren't perfect, etc. I'm getting close. A lot of my pieces of gear are near perfect, so I'll make one more video showcasing the end diary of this build and its potential for things like PvP and the top end. So I hope you enjoyed this. Hope this is informative. Again, if you want to emulate the build below, you can see what's required. Basically, if you don't have the Grizzly Rage things, if you don't have the Earthen Might, or the unique helmet, or the Dancing Bolts, I wouldn't bother starting. This build is not very good to level with. It is not very good early on. This is endgame build for endgame content. So that's it. I'll see you next time on level 100 by then, which will be like a week. And I'll showcase what that looks like, and we'll push up to the higher Nightmare Sigils, the 80s and 90s. We've tried them with a group already. It's extremely hard content. Hopefully we can conquer a 100 just for the screenshot. And yeah, I'll see you guys later. Matt Lighty out. Bye-bye.